fedora is not staying on my head. Hey everyone, thank you so much for clicking on this video today. I hope that you're about to enjoy the discussion we're going to have about my favorite class in law school. I decided to pick this topic this week because it seemed a little happier and lighter in light of everything going on in the world today. And on that note, I did want to quickly address and apologize my inability to include a statement about the murder of George Floyd and the historical racial injustice in our country in last week's video. I had planned and edited that video for about a week and a half and was traveling out of town for my job, and so I wasn't able to edit it or add anything in to address what was going on, and for that I do apologize. I hope that you know by now, and if you saw my post on Instagram, that my stance, values, thoughts, and prayers are with everyone right now who is hurting because of this horrible, horrible crime that is indicative, unfortunately, of a system that is frankly built to advantage certain people and disadvantage to the point of devaluing the very lives of others. Let's do this thing. I've talked many times about my thoughts about the various classes that I had in my first year of law school. Those classes were contracts, property, torts the first semester, and criminal law, civil procedure, and constitutional law the second semester, along with having 2 year-long courses in what was essentially legal writing and legal research. Going into law school, I expected that criminal law would be my favorite class. And to a certain extent, the subject material was, at least for the first half of the semester before the world went crazy. I enjoyed reading the cases in criminal law and thinking about the different issues that came with them. However, as I discussed before, my teacher didn't really teach in a way that made a lot of sense to me. He was more of a super detailed, in the weeds kind of guy, and I am a more why do I care about the trees if I can't see the forest kind of girl. So although there were points of criminal law that I enjoyed and times in the class discussions that were particularly interesting, I wouldn't say it was my favorite class. Because if I think about what my favorite class was, I would think about the class that I maybe didn't enjoy going to the most, but dreaded the least and felt the most engaged and interested in while I was actually sitting in the classroom and working on the homework from home. And if I think about it that way, the answer is abundantly clear and quite shocking in my opinion. My favorite class in my first year of law school ended up being property, of all things. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not going into property law. However, I really enjoyed that class for a couple of reasons. Primarily because of the professor. My property professor was actually visiting from another law school, and despite everything that makes sense in this world, did not end up getting offered a job from Washington University. I cannot for the life of me explain the school's decision, particularly because they sent in a bunch of visiting students to sit in the classroom to watch him teach as an example of what it would be like to go to Washington University. So in my opinion, huge mistake on the part of my law school, and I'm actually pretty disappointed in them for that. One of my favorite things that this professor did at the beginning of every class was recapping and providing some context for the discussion that we would be having that day. I found it really helpful to have that overview, especially after it had been several days of talking about really dense, frustrating material. And on that note, I will say one of my favorite things about the classes was not the material. I had a pretty hard time understanding all of the different rules and procedures, and while some of it was interesting, ultimately it's just not what I want to do in my career, and so it sometimes was hard to stay focused. Which brings me to another thing that made this class my favorite of my first year, which is that I got to sit next to somebody who became one of my friends in law school, who really got clued into what was going on in property and helped me focus and understand as we went. I had other classes where I didn't sit next to any friends, or the structure of the class was such that it didn't really encourage that kind of helping and collaboration. My property professor, though, did more than just encourage that kind of collaboration. He actually had designated days throughout the course in which the entire class period was devoted to some kind of practical application exercise. They were called negotiation days, and we would pair up with a couple partners to engage in a negotiation regarding an issue. I think we had 3 about adverse possession, easements, and how money gets split in a divorce depending on the unique circumstances of that case. I love practical applications. That is the main thing that keeps me engaged in anything. I was gonna say anything in law school, but really just anything. I'm not great when it comes to abstract theory and concepts. It's just not that interesting to me unless I can see a way that it actually matters to my everyday life or what I might be doing in the future. So these negotiations where I was trying to get the best outcome for my hypothetical client while arguing and debating with my classmates was really fun, and I think the rest of my class really appreciated it too. Ultimately, while there were concepts and things that I definitely did not have a firm grasp on in property, I enjoyed going to the class because I knew that I was going to be able to stay focused and learn something from an engaging person who knew what they were talking about and was going to do their best to make sure that I knew what they were talking about. I'm pretty sure I did really well on that exam, and for me to be actually on the bottom half of the curve means that everybody else did really well too. To me, that just means the teacher did a great job, and I wasn't even upset at my score because I knew that I had done a pretty good job and the score I had gotten was fine. And it didn't really matter if other people did a point or 2 better than I did. My class collectively really loved this class so much so that even back in March, after we've been out of this class for 3 months, we set up a Zoom call with our property professor, who is now back in Chicago, just to hang out. I mean, who does that? I guess if there's anything to learn from today's video, it is that your favorite class is probably not going to be determined by the subject material as much as it is going to be by the professor, the people that you're in class with, and the ability to apply what you're learning to real life. I hope this isn't coming across as something to be scared or nervous about. If I were you, I would look at it as something exciting and something to look forward to and figure out. I felt like maybe there was something wrong with me when I was in criminal law and not loving the class. And if that happens to you, there is nothing wrong with you. Law school is just weird like that. Let yourself be open to enjoying classes you didn't think you would. If you go into law school without a particular specialty or career path in mind, this reality can open doors for you that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. And if you're like me and did have a specific thing that you were excited about, just because you don't love the class you're in doesn't mean that you're not going to love the job eventually. Having worked in the DA's office and now working for an attorney general's office, I am very confident in what I want to do and know that I love it. And so just because the subject material taught by a specific person out of a specific textbook during a global pandemic isn't really your style, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be great and loving your job after law school. That's it for this week. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I will see you next Monday, and until then, God bless. I'm having such a hard time thinking of anything I learned in property.